Daniel Henderson. Michael DiMartini. Bill Hauk. Michael Drinkwater.
Here.
John Enlow. John Flansburgh. Mickey Hazelwood.
Here.
John Martini. Darren Price. Dave Solero.
Here.
Mervyn Wright. John Zimmerman. Harry Fonstock. Eddie Qualieri. Mila Nujayan. Cindy Turchek. Ron Penrose. We have a quorum.
Now is the time reserved for public comments. It's limited to 3 minutes per person. I don't have any public comment cards here, but I see if there's a public that would like to speak. Seeing none, we'll go on to approval of the agenda.
Move to approve as presented.
We have a motion by Commissioner Drinkwater, second by Commissioner Flansburgh. All those in favor?
Aye.
Nay. Motion carries unanimously. Our next item is approval of the minutes for the May 2nd, 2018 meeting. There's a motion for approval by Mr. Commissioner Price,
Second.
and a second by Commissioner Dave Solero. Yes, John?
I saw one typo on the minutes, so the approval should be subject to correction of that, and it's in the second, it's the first sentence after the first paragraph, and it says, "The meeting was called to order by Vice Chair DiMartini," so it looks like you were demoted, unbeknownst to you, so we'll just delete that vice. The motion would be subject to that correction. Thank you.
With that modification, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, motion carries unanimously. Our next item relates to adoption of a resolution number 1801, recognizing Commissioner Darren Price for his many years of service in the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission and outstanding contributions to the regional resources planning. Regional water resources planning. Good point. Mr. Price, I would like to point out, has been serving this county on both this commission and the original Regional Water Planning Commission, starting when that was first enacted back in 1995. So it's been just a few years, and we see a lot of contributions. Jim, I think you have something you would like to introduce on this item.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to read a resolution into the record and then ask for approval and adoption by motion of the commission. So it was tough, but we got all this to fit onto one page. So I had to shrink the font a little bit, but there's a lot to write. Yeah, that's right. So resolution number 1801, recognizing Darren Price for his contribution to the regional water management in the Truckee Meadows. Whereas Darren Price has served on the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission for 10 years since its creation in April 2008 by the Nevada legislature, and whereas Darren served as first chairman of the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission from April 2008 to March 2009, and whereas Darren served on the Washoe County Regional Water Planning Commission prior to the creation of the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission, and whereas Darren faithfully represented the Sun Valley General Improvement District on both commissions with diligence and integrity, and whereas Darren's service significantly impacted his work and personal time, and whereas Darren's extensive knowledge of water utility service and infrastructure planning in the Truckee Meadows has been invaluable to this community, and whereas Darren has been a champion of fiscal responsibility and prudent budgeting and spending of the financial resources of the Regional Water Management Fund, and whereas Darren has demonstrated the highest standards of professional conduct, carrying out his duties with integrity and dedication, benefiting the board and customers of the Sun Valley General Improvement District, the citizens of the Truckee Meadows, and the members of the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission, and whereas the staff and members of the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission have enjoyed working with Darren due to his pleasant temperament, his experience in water issues, his fair-minded leadership, and his ability to help move an issue forward, and whereas recognition for a job well done is very much deserved by Darren Price. Now therefore be it resolved by the Northern Nevada Water Planning Commission that Darren Price be recognized for his contribution to the commission's efforts and that he will be greatly missed by the members, by the staff, and all who worked with him. Be it further resolved that Darren accept this resolution in appreciation of his contribution to better water management in the Truggy Meadows and as a reminder of the respect that the Northern Water Planning Commission has for him, adopted this 6th day of June, 2018.
Well, thank you, Jim, even the stretch of truth.
If ever there were an occasion.
Yeah, it's been actually an honor to serve on this commission. I realize I'm full of effort, especially an honor to serve with so many great commissioners over the years. I really do appreciate it. I will miss serving on the commission and the importance it has to the community, and I wish all of you the best of luck in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Darren.
Thank you very, very much. And presume that if we have a question, your vast knowledge and experience will give you a call. I'll be willing to answer. I'll entertain a motion to such this resolution. There's a motion from Commissioner Flansburgh. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
A second from Commissioner Solero.
And then for discussion, Darren, appreciate the opportunity to work with you, not only here, but in the Joint Coordinating Committee for Tom Wharf. And I do appreciate many of those attributes that were discussed. They are true. Your fiscal mindedness, your devotion and commitment to those principles that you hold strongly and are correct. So thank you for your service.
Thank you, Commissioner Flansburgh. Commissioner Solero.
And whereas I have learned from Darren Price over the years, I will be giving you a call at some point to see how that retirement life is and get some pointers from you at some point. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Solero. Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Seeing none, motion. Seeing none,
See how we waited on that one.
thank you, Darren. We appreciate you serving on this commission and wish the best for everything. If you need anything from us, feel free to call anytime. Yeah, so we joked about it before the meeting. Michael, you and I are the last two survivors from the original commission, and then there was one. Okay, thanks very much. We'll go on to the next item. Discussion and possible approval of a third amendment to the interlocal agreement with Desert Research Institute, DRI, for regional precipitation monitoring project, extending the agreement to continue the project for a term of 1 year and amount not to exceed $5,000 from the Regional Water Fund. Chris Wessel, organizer, planner, Dr. Dan
McAvoy.
McAvoy.
McAvoy. And thank you, Mr. Chair. Just as a reminder, this project involves the collection of precipitation data in various basins throughout the southern Washoe County by means of precipitation cans. Rather low-tech method, but low-tech and reliable. The project began in 1990s, and many of the sites, which there are over 70, around 80 of them, have 15 to 20-year records associated with them. Project was orphaned during the merger, and we were the logical resting place for it. So we took up funding of this project, and this proposal that's in your packet today is an ongoing monitoring network for the proposal for fiscal year 2018-19. And here to discuss that a little bit with you and discuss the findings that we've got so far is Dr. McAvoy from the DRI's climatology department. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dan.
All right, thank you, Chris, and thanks for having me here today. I'm just going to briefly present our plan for continuing with the contract an extra year that we had from last year. I do want to first mention that I'm filling in for Greg McCurdy, who's CI on this project, and he's out in the field, so he wasn't able to make it today. So basically, we're just proposing to continue what we did last year, which was continue the operations and maintenance of this precipitation can network that's scattered out southern and central Washoe County. Greg McCurdy is the primary one doing the field work out there. We took over the monitoring in the summer of 2016, and since then, the cans, these are manual storage gauges, so they're emptied about twice a year. So Greg tries to get out there in the fall and then empty them again around this time of year to get 2 seasonal estimates of precipitation. The other part, which I do a little bit of, is helping process the data. Greg goes out there and writes all these measurements down in a notebook, and then we process it into digital format, which is available. And then we also have been plotting up the observations to see what it looks like out there. So I just want to refresh everyone on what the network looks like, where these stations are. The top left panel is a good chunk of Washoe County and shows all the gauges. There's 78 gauges out there right now. I think Greg actually installed a couple more last fall. Again, some of these were installed as early as 1998, so there's this is getting long enough for climatological record, to get an estimate of trends in precipitation in some of these regions. And just to mention, aside from these gauges, there's really hardly any monitoring stations out there that measure precipitation, particularly once you get up past Pyramid Lake into central and northern Washoe County. Again, these are the storage gauges, and I mentioned they're emptied twice a year. So I just wanted to show you what some of the observations from this year look like. So Greg collected these ones from Dry Valley and Bedell Flat. I think it was the last couple days of May. And so this is the total precipitation from November. So they were emptied, I think it was October 31st or November 1st. And so this is basically a November through May total precipitation from these gauges. You do see a bit of a range there. There is a bit of a gradient where the further west is wetter and further east, on the east side of Bedell Flat is by far drier, so anywhere from 8 to about 15 inches of precipitation, so pretty big gradient out there. I did want to highlight one area just to show an example. So that furthest one in Dry Valley, furthest north, that got around 12 to 13 inches of precipitation. I wanted to show what some of these gridded spatial estimates look like. So if you don't have these cans, what type of products are used to currently estimate the water balance, the water budget out there, and how good or bad they may actually be with these estimates. So this is a similar map, but this is from a tool called Climate Engine that was developed at DRI and University of Idaho. And this is going to be showing the grid met data. This is very similar to PRISM. It uses PRISM to develop a 4-kilometer grid. And so what I wanted to show you is this is the same time period, November through May. And so anything in the dark blue there, and you can see how big those grid cells are. 4 kilometer might sound kind of small, but for this type of terrain, small mountain ranges, 4 kilometers is actually pretty large scale. And so you can see how big those pixels are. And the one that I've highlighted, the estimate from the gridded data was 20 inches, and the actual observed was about 12 inches. So these gridded data sets that are being used to drive hydrologic models and such are way overestimating, particularly in the higher elevations. What we've been seeing as we've been collecting this data is that there's not huge differences between the valleys and the higher elevations, as you might expect with something like the Sierra Nevada, where you really see this clear elevation-dependent signal with a lot more precipitation in the higher elevations. We're not really seeing that in these mountain ranges to the east of the Sierra Nevada. We think, one, because the Sierra Nevada is there and it's so close and so much larger, we don't have the same orographic patterns driving precipitation in these smaller mountain ranges. So these gauges can prove to be really valuable for things like estimating annual precipitation and climatological precipitation. I did want to mention we do have one potential use of the data, and so the contract we had last year, we did an analysis where we compared these observations to PRISM. which is very similar to what I'm showing here. And, you know, it showed that PRISM really overestimated precipitation quite a bit in these basins. There is another project with Greg Pohl at the Desert Research Institute. They're working on developing a surface water groundwater model for Lemon Valley. They want to reconstruct the levels of Swan Lake and also potentially develop a flood forecasting tool for Swan Lake area. And so they're looking around now for precipitation estimates, and they're potentially going to use this CAN data. And they also want to use PRISM to drive their model. And so we're going to potentially provide them bias-corrected estimates from the analysis that we did using these CANs, just to highlight one utility, one potential utility, especially with development going on in these northern basins. So that was all I had on that one. I don't know if you want to hold off
We'll hold
before
off on that
the
till
next
next.
project.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, I'll take questions if there are any.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have questions on this first part of the report. Yes, any questions? Yes.
I just wanted to ask you to explain in a little bit more detail your spatial precipitation estimates versus the CAN estimates, and where did the PRISM and what other buses, where did that come from?
Yeah, so PRISM and GridMet, as I mentioned, they're very similar. They use available observations in the region, and so the CANs are not incorporated into there since they're only updated seasonally, collected seasonally. You get 2 measurements a year. But there's one of the reasons why these spatial estimates are so far off is because there's really hardly any precipitation estimates going into their models to make these estimates, because there's no stations up there, and that's one of the big reasons why they're so far off. And so they use sophisticated interpolation techniques that take into account the elevation, the aspect, the slope, things like inversions for temperature. And so these models really want to drive higher precipitation as you go up the mountainside, and we're just not seeing that. And so really they're generated from local observations in the area as their primary source of input.
Yes. Mr. Griswold.
So as a reminder, I believe we saw this a year ago, and I think I was the only one who voted no to continue this program. So I'm interested in seeing this, if it is valuable, continue. And so my question to that end is, where does this data live? I mean, I heard you say that there's a potential application for this data in the North Valley's, the Lemon Valley precipitation analysis and the Swan Lake, historic Swan Lake levels. How would a potential scientist or researcher know that this database exists, that they might use this data so that our investment actually, bears some fruit, if you will? Does it live in a public forum, or how would they know to call you to get to the data?
Right. I don't think it's very widely known right now. It is all digitized. It's not available directly to the public. We are happy to share it. One thing we could do is host it on a public, pretty easily just host it, have a little, on our Western Regional Climate Center page, have a tab that goes to this project, and you can access those digital data files. That's something we can certainly do to make it more accessible.
Personally, yeah, Mr. Wessel, I'm sorry.
Just real quickly, Dan's probably not aware of this, but we would also post this on the digital library, be available there, the updated information, and we would update it. We can also publish the updated spreadsheet. There is a formal report that is coming out. We've just in the final, going through editing at DRI, but that will be available through the digital library. I do recognize the issue, though, that people aren't aware that this program exists out there. I'm not, I would hope that all of you would dissipate that information perhaps to the individuals that come to you and ask. Certainly, we would let them know, and if they were to contact DRI, I don't see, there wouldn't be any reason why DRI couldn't redirect them at least to the web, to our digital library to pick that information up, if that's how they wanted to do it. But any other suggestions on that, we're certainly open to that. This is probably the first practical application we've had of the data that I'm aware of. So,
Thank you, Chris. That was my question also. I would be looking forward to
yeah.
this being available as soon as it is available. Maybe let us know.
Yeah, and there would be one other thing that I was hoping that we would do is if we have a GIS interface or mapping, we could put in a layer that would provide the information on the various cans just by clicking on them. And I'm waiting for the final report to come out to hopefully generate that. And then that way the data would be available directly through a GIS interface, a mapping program.
And that final report will be sent to Chris probably today or tomorrow. It's just about wrapped up.
Great. Mr. Chairman, one more question. Yeah, I just wanted to know, can you share who the sponsor is of the study that Greg Pohl is
Oh,
involved
yeah,
in?
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that. It's the Army Corps.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, very good.
This is a possible action item.
One quick question.
Yes.
So does this include, has all the data from the beginning been digitized and it's all available that way? I remember when, for sure, when we had the stuff prior to, we used some notebooks and some other things. Curious if all that stuff's been digitized and dealt with that.
Yep, it is. The whole record for each location, you can get all the observations from whenever the station went into place.
Yeah.
Action item? I'll entertain a motion.
All those to approve.
We have a motion from Commissioner Flansburgh. Second from Commissioner Enlow. Comment from our attorney.
To the maker and the seconder of the motion, could I add that your motion includes authorization for Mr. Smitherman to execute the agreements, just so the record is clear?
So moved.
Thank you.
So we have the motion has been modified and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just a comment. I think it would be important to, to review the past data, especially in response to the wildfires, that have occurred, out in northern Washoe County, and even to look at how vegetation is responding to precipitation, throughout the year. I think it would be important to at least understand that on a level from grazing management to wildfire, preparation.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that would be a great use of the data.
Okay. Thank you, and we'll go on to item 7, which is discussion and possible approval of a 4th amendment to the ILA with DRI for the Washoe Evapotranspiration Project, extending the agreement to continue the project for a term of 1 year, with amount not to exceed $10,000 from the Regional Water Management Fund. Chris Whistle?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. As you know, the Washoe ET project is a conservation element of the regional management plan, and it's identified in that plan. The project's goal is to provide irrigators, both commercial and private, with the ability to modify their watering use based on evapotranspiration rates. The attached request is a proposal for the operation maintenance of stations for FY 18-19. The proposal includes maintenance of 2 additional stations that are actually being installed hopefully this month. And so normally Greg McCurdy would be here to present on it. Again, he was unable to make this meeting, and so he's out. So either Dan or I will be able to hopefully field any questions that you have with regards to this item.
Yeah, and Chris summarized that pretty good, which I pretty much have up here on the first slide. The 2 new stations, I have a map on the next slide, but the 2 new stations that are going are at the Lemon Valley Regional Park and the Cold Spring Community Center. Greg anticipates those should be completed hopefully by the end of this month, if not definitely shortly after that. And then this is just the map showing where the current locations are, and the two red circles are where the new ones are going to be installed. And then on the right is what the typical station looks like. And to get the ET estimates, we need more than just precipitation and temperature. We need the wind speed, the solar radiation, and the humidity estimates, which are, that along with temperature are the 4 drivers that go into estimating the evapotranspiration. And that really, that can really vary locally, even throughout, you know, the Washoe County and the Washoe Valley, going down to the Wilson Commons area. During the summertime, wind speed is the biggest driver of ET in this region. And so we know the wind patterns can vary quite a bit. And so it's really important to have different estimates of ET throughout the region, so that commercial or residential users can help understand how much water they need to use. And I'll take any questions.
Any questions? If not, I do have one myself, and that is, an issue came up a couple of years ago or so, Dan, with regards to somewhat newly published information at the State Engineer's Office regarding lake evaporation, evapotranspiration. According to their study that was done throughout Nevada, I've compared the evaporation rates that we're getting from these particular gauges to those published rates by the state. And there appeared to be a difference of what was something like 20 to 40%, where the rates from these gauges generally appear to be about 20 to 40% higher than what the state rates are that are utilized for irrigation and water allocation. To make a long story short, the issue is that the state does not appear to be recognizing the amount of water that these gauges would determine, in my opinion, as being necessary. So in other words, one can't utilize the water to the extent that the gauges say we should water to. I know there's been a partial look into that by DRI, and they looked at one particular gauge and felt that there was some orographic effects on the gauge mounted on the DRI building that would account for, at least with regards to that gauge, the variation. So again, long story short, is there something that could be looked into with regards to this as part of the operation that would try to provide information to the public as to the potential differences?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I don't specifically know the report that you were referring to. You mentioned lake evaporation. I know that those estimates are definitely going to be quite a bit different than like a grass reference ET. And also the actual evapotranspiration estimates are different than the reference ET estimates that come off of these stations. So for example, for a given crop or someone's lawn, you would take the reference ET estimate, and then you have to multiply it by what's called the crop coefficient, which is dependent on the vegetation type, to get the actual ET estimate. And I don't know if that was taken into account comparing the state versus these estimates or not.
I believe it was. All
Okay.
those factors were looked at. And,
Okay.
there was some contact between the State Engineer's Office, hydrologist, and the DRI's expert regarding that.
Was Justin Huntington involved in that, do you know, from DRI?
I think that might have been one of the people that was involved.
Okay. Well, I guess to get to your point, we do have, I should have put the website up there, but the website has been live for a long time now, and you can go in there, choose which station you want, and get your ET, the amount of water that you're supposed to use for irrigation. And you can see how that changes is one quick way to see. You can choose all the different stations if you wanted to, just to see how different that estimate would be depending on the ET from these different stations would be a quick way to see that.
Yes, and I've done that and examined most all the gauges and looked at those differences. And again, I think this is a new report at the State Engineer's Office from a couple of years ago, a rather large study. And I'm not suggesting there's anything wrong with anything, it's just that there may be some information that needs to be disseminated to explain really the effect of a particular gauge, like the DRI gauge that's up on top of the building may not be representative in that area for people that are watering down in the valley in that part of the region.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, one thing that I'm pretty sure all the gauges do have is pictures of the setting of where the gauges are in to get a sense if it's something reflecting like where you're trying to get an estimate of water use. I think that would be kind of a quick and dirty way to see if the gauge was going to be useful for your area or not. But it is very specific, and something like a gauge on top of a building is not going to be showing the same information as a gauge down in a field. And so I think it's really important to understand. I don't know if you're suggesting maybe more description about each gauge and the setting it's in, perhaps.
Well, I think what it is simply is it's just an item that hasn't. There's been no authorization at this point for either the state or DRI to look at this particular issue. The one gauge was looked at, and some of the differences were explained, which were quite large at that one gauge, but the rest of the gauges, as I understand, were not looked at. I did look at them, and it looks like the same issue is occurring, for instance, on the Valley Road gauge. I was getting numbers of 30 or 40% difference on that gauge, and so I think there may be some fine print somewhere that explains just the difference so that one can understand you don't need to get this many water rights to water your alfalfa for this reason. That's kind of the issue.
Right. That's a great point, and I think we can look into clarifying those issues.
If I might, Mr. Chair, I think the intent of this project was really more focused on landscape irrigation more so than crop irrigation. So I'm not sure, and the sites that we sponsored, now I know that UNR and UNR Farms are both in there. Those are stations that existed already through DRI. The other stations, Lazy 5, Cold Springs, Lemon Valley, Wolf Run, and Wilson Commons, were all ones that we installed, and they were specifically intended to provide information about grass areas related to landscape. So, for example, Wolf Run is on the golf course, so you'd expect that to give it. And the idea was not only for residential, but large commercial municipal users like Washoe County, the Reno, Sparks, Washoe County, to all use as a basis for their irrigation modification. And I think that was the intent of the project. The other stations that may exist in here, like the UNR campus, we put them in there because they were available. So but it might be something we could do to make sure that there's an explanation in there. I'm not sure how those gauges are situated, but the others were situated based on the requirement that they be within a grass area and so on. There's specific requirements for how ET's information is collected.
Yeah, so with that, I would want to make it clear, we're not expecting the DRI to do more work than what they're proposing for this 20,000. I understand that's for the installation of the 2 new gauges and not for doing a study. That's what I'm talking about. Commissioner Price?
So I was glad to see on here that you're gonna include quarterly reports on the website statistics, because I've been asking for that for a long time. I'm really curious if people like the website and how that's going. So I hope that you bring those reports forward. The other thing is, you're talking about distributing the brochure. Is part of your request in this cost the printing and distribution of that brochure? And just a side comment, just to include the Nevada landscapers and the Reno Sparks nurseries, I think your list is really small, and it should go out to a lot more than that. But I'm curious, is the printing of the brochures included in this cost?
Unfortunately, I can't answer that question. As I mentioned, I'm filling in for Greg, and I'm not actually really part of this project directly, so I can't answer those budget details for you. But we could find out for you.
We'll call you.
Any more questions or information?
Yeah,
All right, Mr.
and if
Swindler?
I could add that we do get quarterly reports that have the website traffic statistics. It's just that Dan didn't bring them, this isn't his project, but we can provide those to you as well. But after today, you won't be on the commission anymore, so, okay, yeah, we can make those available, though.
Thank you, Mr. Smithman. Commissioner Flansburgh,
I'll move to approve the staff recommendation.
we have a motion for approval. Is there a second? We have a second from Commissioner Hawk.
Comment again.
Comment?
Same addition, if I may, that your program manager is authorized to sign the agreement. Thank you.
And that's why I did the staff recommendation, because it was clear in there.
Thank you. It was in there then.
Thank you, John, for keeping us on track. And thank you, Commissioner Flansburgh. Commissioner Hawk. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. McEvoy.
Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon. Close enough. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Our next item is the program manager's report. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The two elements of the program manager's report are in your packet, similar to what you see every month. The first one, item 8A, is the projects list, and you'll be seeing the list change as we drop projects off at the end of the fiscal year and reauthorize others. So I can answer any questions about the specific listings on here right now, but just that keep watching it from month to month. Because the new projects, as we authorize them, will show up. On the second side, 8B is the expense report, and this should be a full fiscal year report through period 12 for fiscal year 18. We exceeded our revenue estimate by a little, 35,000 or so, and then we underspent what we had budgeted to spend, so we finished the year well into the black. And I can answer questions on that to the best of my ability if there are any of those. Back to you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Do you know, Jim, whether there's more revenue coming in, being that water conservation is not on the agenda? I mean, not going right now? Or will that be in future reports?
We did see an effect when the water conservation was called for in when Tumwa put out the request for 10% or more water conservation. We did see the effect, because really our revenue rises and falls on Tumwa's revenue, or at least on their water bill revenues, and so I wouldn't say that we saw a spike now, but we did see a bit of an effect in the negative direction during the height of the water conservation.
Okay, so possibly this summer we'll see whether there is a difference or not, or whether people continue to conserve even though we've had relatively wet weather. Any questions on this report? Seeing none, this is not an action item. So we'll go on to item 9, discussion regarding location and possible agenda items for the July 2018 meeting, other future meetings, possible direction of staff. Mr. Mr. Smithers.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. This year, the July meeting would fall directly on Independence Day, and so at this point, traditionally, there would be a rush to make a motion to cancel the July meeting, and so I'll assume that that's going to happen and go on to the next meeting, which would be scheduled on August 1st. And as far as agenda items on deck for that meeting, we would be, let's see, hopefully getting a report from Commissioner Hazelwood on Truckee River restoration projects. And he and I talked, and that timing works out well for him. Hopefully, it works out well for this commission. And then we would be bringing the Washoe County Population Consensus Forecast compiled by the Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Agency. So Dr. Jeremy Smith would bring that along, and then along with that, I would be presenting a comparison with our water resources potentially available that are identified in the Regional Water Management Plan. As you recall, we do that every year, or every 2 years when the consensus forecast comes out. And then we have to report the findings with a recommendation to the Western Regional Water Commission. They make a determination, and that gets communicated back to the Regional Planning Commission so that they can adopt the consensus forecast. And then also, hopefully, if it's ready, we'd get a report on the Watershed Management Plan Gap Analysis Project that I believe is near completion. So that one I'll put a question mark by, and you'll see it on your agenda if it's ready to go. And then I would turn it back to you for any additional comments or requests for agenda items.
Any additional items anybody has on this item?
Just a question.
Yes, Commissioner Flansburgh.
So Jim, is the commission chambers available on August 1st?
It should be, but I'll check.
Okay.
I'll check, and if it's not, then we'll let you guys know where we convene.
I would make a motion that our that we cancel the July meeting, and our next meeting would be August 1st, based on availability of the location will be determined.
We have a motion to cancel the July meeting and have the next meeting be August 1st. So a second?
Second.
A second from Commissioner Solero. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Now we go on to commission comments. Any commissioners have any comments? Darren, you want to make a last comment?
I will. Yeah, right.
Can't fire you.
I would just say, I want to thank Jim and Chris and June, where she is. I mean, you guys are fantastic in this position, so lucky to have you guys. Really appreciate the hard work you guys do to make us shine, and I appreciate it. So, good luck in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Price, and I think I'll add to that. He's speaking for all of us, I believe, and for the excellent staff that we have and keeping these meetings going and doing all the work that really provides the running of this body. So thank you very much again. Any staff comments?
Yeah, just one. Darren, thank you. That was absolutely in character for you, and my comment was going to be what a pleasure it's been working with you for the last, I think I've been around here for 15 years or so. And Darren's gone out of his way more times than I can count to express his appreciation for staff and the work that we do. So I just wanted to say back at you, thank you so much for all that you have done. And then one last comment, we put together a little certificate of appreciation for you too. And I know in the past you have commented that, you know, a certain commissioner or someone that we're showing appreciation to deserves a plaque or something. So you know what, we got you something that you could actually hang on your wall. You deserve it, and anybody does. So thank you so much.
A little something to hang on your wall.
Oh, very good.
Fantastic. Starbucks gift card on the back, right?
Thank you again.
Thank you. I just like to ditto what Jim just said, so.
Thanks.
Okay.
Did you, it's here, yeah, good, go ahead.
Move to approve, Mr.
gotta sign it.
Okay. Is he gonna let me do it?
Any staff? Are we there yet? I'm looking for staff comment. Any staff? We're done with that. Any public comments? Or Jim, is there any staff comments?
No more staff.
You're done, okay. Any public comments? This is the time for public comments, limited 3 minutes per person. We have no public comment cards, and it looks like nobody is desiring to speak, so we'll go on to adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
We have a motion for adjournment, second?
The final motion to adjourn.
Hey, we should have given you a
All in
gavel.
favor? Aye. Opposed? Yay. Motion carries unanimously. Thanks very much.
Should have given you a ceremonial gavel.